Chapter 30. The next morning, Anne scarcely had time to eat breakfast before members of the New York Vigilance Committee began arriving. They praised her for her courage and pressed gifts into her arms. Girls' clothes to change into once she was safe in Canada. A warm cape and bonnet, knitted brown mittens and scarf, a dress made of deep green wool, bloomers, stockings, a slip, and a small leather suitcase in which to pack it all. "You'll need everything you can carry to keep warm in Canada," said a round, pale woman in a widow's black dress. Anne's stomach had begun to do little flips with each mention of Canada. In a very short time, the Reverend Freeman would come to get her and start the journey. "And don't you let that suitcase out of your sight," said the widow, her gray eyes narrowing, "or someone is liable to step off the train with all your possessions." Anne's stomach did a tremendous flip. The train? In Philadelphia, she'd watched a train rumble wildly along its tracks, spewing black smoke like an angry monster. And Laura had told her about the gory accidents, when at night folks didn't see the engine's lamp, didn't hear the warning whistle, and got torn to pieces by the monster. She didn't want to get near a train, let alone get on one. Sarah Tappan interrupted her thoughts. "Anne Maria, the man is here to take your daguerreotype." Anne found herself being hurried over to a chair. Louis Tappan brought her cap and placed it carefully on her head. Sarah Tappan smoothed her lapels and straightened her tie. "We want you to look like a boy, but a nice neat boy," she said. A lanky white man stood next to a large black contraption on stilts. He told her to sit very still. Then he disappeared behind the contraption. Anne smelled something that reminded her of the orange iodine Mistress Carol used on Miss Sarah's knees when she skinned them. After a few minutes, the man told her she was free to move. As he tinkered with a thin copper plate, the air filled with the odor of rotten eggs. "We'll send the plates to your parents as soon as they're developed," said Mr. Tappan. A loud knock sounded at the door, and Mrs. Tappan hurried to answer it. A tall, thin-shouldered gentleman entered. He had a long face and a straight nose that made him look as if he had Indian blood in his veins, along with the African blood. Everyone from the Vigilance Committee seemed to know him, and there was handshaking all around. When he came to Anne, he said, "You must be the guest of honor. I'm Reverend Freeman. I understand we'll be traveling to Canada together." Anne's hands went clammy. "Yes," she said softly. All the way to Canada, today, on a train. She did not feel the least bit ready, but knew there was nothing she could do but follow her journey to its end. The final goodbyes from the members of the Vigilance Committee, the drive through the gathering dusk in the Tappans' carriage to the train station, her first close-up view of a monster train sitting idle spitting steam. It all felt like part of a dream. She could just as well have been watching it as living it. Anne climbed up the steep steps into the train car. She figured it was better to be inside a train rather than outside, near the dangerous tracks. She took her seat next to the Reverend Freeman in the car reserved for colored passengers. As she looked out at the night, the train lurched, hissed, and started its slow chugging. The motion quickened and gathered speed until they were flying through the darkness with the wide black Hudson River on their left and short jagged cliffs and forest on their right. The train jostled her, shoving her back and forth relentlessly. She felt the miles fly past with more speed than she'd ever experienced, and felt the distance growing between her and everything she had ever known. And as the rhythm of the train vibrated her bones, it meshed with an old familiar rhythm inside her, a rhythm that spoke. As she listened, it said, "Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye."